The Volunteers had their spring game yesterday. I thought it was the best case scenario, to be honest with you, given the circumstances. Remember, when Josh Heupel came in, it wasn't in the past tense. It is under a very strange set of circumstances. A lot of that, in fact, most of it's out of his control, and it didn't even have anything to do with spring necessarily. But having all that in mind, and then considering how much of the roster was unavailable yesterday due to various reasons, I thought we got a clear idea of what they want the offense to be. I thought it was a crystal clear idea. We saw what is shaping up to be a legitimate quarterback battle. There are some quarterback battles out there that are being presented to you as maybe a different thing than they actually are. This right here at Tennessee, I don't think they have the slightest clue who's going to start. I know maybe who they want to start, but you can't want a guy to start. You have to put him in position and have him take the job. There's certainly a different energy around the program. It was a really good brand day for Tennessee. Ton of defensive guys out, so you can remember that as if you haven't already watched it, you go back and watch it. But we were asking on the Thursday show, kind of what was the offense going to look like this season, but then just in the spring game, what's the offense going to look like? Well, we got the answer. They didn't really try and masquerade as being something that they weren't going to be. There were, let me turn my notes sideways, 9 pass plays in this game of 20 yards or more. So this was not exactly the old Jeremy Pruitt, Jim Chaney Express in Knoxville. Things did look much different. Tempo-based, vertical elements of the passing game there. As I said, they had 9 plays of 20 yards or more in the passing game. The key to watch here is the guys that are already there that you inherit. Some of them were recruited, well, most of them were recruited by Jeremy Pruitt, obviously, that may not have ever stood out to you. How many of those guys, unbeknownst to any of us, just happen to be perfect fits? This happens every time you get a new staff in the door. There is a guy or two, or hopefully like 7 or 8, who are on the roster who didn't really particularly stand out previously, that all of a sudden, for whatever reason, they just click. They just click. We talked about that with, for instance, some of the running backs down at Auburn. Well, how many of those guys exist at Tennessee? At quarterback, this is a truly wide open competition. I know yesterday my eyes tell me Harrison Bailey probably had the best day. That's what my eyes told me. I thought Hooker did some things. I thought Maurer did some things. Obviously, when you have that many pass plays of 20 yards or more, it isn't one guy doing all of them. But I think a lot of us, and I'll include myself in this group, a lot of us looked at Harrison Bailey last year and thought maybe he's going to be too young, but hopefully he's the future of Tennessee football. And then when the new staff comes in, I would imagine even they looked at him, along with us, if we think this way, and looked at Harrison Bailey and said, that's probably the guy with the biggest upside. That's probably the guy with the best toolbox of the tools that we want to execute this offense at a high level. Let's hope he takes the job, but you can't just give it to him. He's got to take the job. Well, he had not exactly done that throughout spring ball. Talking to people around the Tennessee program, it had not been Harrison Bailey rolling with the ones every rep in practice, and then there was a distant second and third, very clear pecking order. If anything, it was the opposite. Harrison Bailey yesterday started with the 3s. Now, everyone structures their spring format differently, so I won't read too deeply into that. But suffice it to say, he had not been a guaranteed lock of anything throughout the spring. Granted, Heupel's been there like 15 minutes, so I don't know how much to read into that. But yesterday, I thought he had the best day. So this is one of those perception and reality deals, because he was not, he being Harrison Bailey, not exactly their best quarterback throughout spring so far, but yet in the spring game, well, he just happens to look the best. So what do we have here? Well, I think what we have is a wide open quarterback competition. And I also want to remind you, there was a young man by the name of Joe Milton in town, not on the field, not dressed out, in town. Now, that's the guy presumably transferring in from Michigan, started the season from Michigan last year. Things quickly deteriorated in Ann Arbor. Now, here's where it stands. Joe Milton has been admitted to Tennessee. He is in the database there. So if you go to Tennessee right now, he is allegedly your classmate. But we have not gotten any official announcement from anywhere, at least as of the last hour we haven't. So is Harrison Bailey good enough to win this job? Of course he is. Could I see a scenario where Brian Maurer plays his way into it, Hendon Hooker plays his way into it? Yes, I could. I could also see Joe Milton playing his way into it, and he hasn't even taken a snap yet. That is a wide-open quarterback competition. Now, the next big question is going to be, as you enter the media day season, as you enter fall camp, how long do you allow this to go before you start to narrow that thing down? You don't have to narrow it down and name a starter going into fall camp, but you can't have a wide-open 4 or 5 horse competition going into fall camp either, so I don't think that's going to be the case. Their defensive line needs help. Josh Heupel was very upfront about this. In fact, one specific position group that he singled out in his post-game media availability is he said, we got to get help on the defensive line in the transfer portal. Now, Elijah Simmons was out yesterday, Aubrey Solomon, Emerson was out, Daryl Middleton, Latrell Bumpus. There were a lot of guys out yesterday. So maybe the layman's eye looks at that game and says, oh, with all those guys back, we'll be okay. It doesn't sound like that coaching staff thinks so. So even with all those guys coming back, if they all do come back, and there are varying degrees of status, or stati, the plural of status. If it's not already, we should make it happen. There are varying degrees of truth to why this guy was out, why that. I have no clue why Middleton was out, to be honest with you. So I just think that that's a position of emphasis, or it's going to be for them in the transfer portal. They had a good start. Tennessee had a good start with the two-front approach, as we call it around here. There was noticeable energy. There was noticeable excitement. There was a much greater uptick in offensive production. The only thing I want to caution, this is not to be negative, the only thing I want to caution is, like I said to start the show and like I'll continue to reiterate, every staff, when they come in, you hear interviews about how now guys are more connected to each other. It's more of a family environment. It's more upbeat. It's more positive. This is all you ever hear. No coaching staff ever comes in and has less energy. No coaching staff ever comes in and people are disconnected. I just want to remind you, as much as everyone is enjoying the looseness and the upbeat nature of the program right now, I just want to remind you, when Jeremy Pruitt came in the door, some of the same folks I talked to at Tennessee, you know what they told me? I really love that finally we got a no-nonsense guy in here. We got a guy who is more fire and brimstone, because we had enough of Butch Jones. Third down and what? Garbage cans on the field. We had enough of that. And so now we need a guy who can really drag a ball and chain in here and we can go to work. So I'm just saying, anecdotally, people always find reasons to be excited. Josh Heupel could be the answer to this program's prayers. This staff could flame out in 3 years. But if they are successful, I don't really think it's going to be because people feel warm and fuzzy 15 practices into his tenure. That's all I'm saying. Let's move on. It sounded negative. I know it did. I'm not being negative. I'm just trying to be realistic with you.